Both of us come from the York School, which is an independent school here in Toronto. And just to make sure you're in the right session, today we're going to be walking you through our grade 7 Oceans unit, which was a new approach we took to teaching chemistry and ecology through the lens of one of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is life below water. So basically the structure of this session is we are going to tell you our initial ideas and how we approach the unit, show you how we were able to link 2 different strands in the grade 7 curriculum and put that together with the Sustainable Development Goals, show you some of the activities that we did, talk to you about what we would do if we were to do it again, because this was our first run through it, and then share with you a whole bunch of resources. So Robin, maybe if you want to go back to the first slide, if anyone didn't get a chance to copy down these links, the first one is the link to this presentation if you'd like to follow along or have for later. And the second one is a link to a Google Drive folder with everything in it that we have. Yeah.
So everybody's in the right room then.
Mostly this session is just going to be Robin and I telling you what we did. So hopefully we won't be talking at you for too long. I know you've all had a long day. But there'll be time at the end. We can talk about your ideas, how you might implement this in your classroom. You can have some time to go through the folder. And if at any time you want to interrupt us to ask questions, please feel free. Okay. Am I okay to switch? Good. Okay. So this was just the description that we put out in the STAO online conference information. So we started kind of just to get the kids interested, talking about ocean issues. Did you know that in 2050 there'll be more plastic in the ocean than fish? And we led students through scaffolded inquiry, from structured to guided to free inquiry, to help investigate these issues and come up with solutions to these issues. Essentially, what we really wanted to accomplish with this particular unit was we wanted to empower the students to take action. For me as a teacher, one of my ultimate goals is that my students leave my classroom and they go out there and they make a difference in the world. But what I often find happens in my school is that community service activities are always extraneous to the classroom. So there'll be a club or there'll be something that they do in assembly. And I always wanted to embed service into my curriculum. So this was my attempt, and Robin's, at doing that. So we really wanted to empower students with the knowledge, the skills, and the confidence to go out there and solve real-world problems. And we used the UN Sustainable Development Goals, specifically number 14, which is life below water, as the lens through which to view the problem. And then we actually used the science curriculum as the vehicle to drive the learning towards finding solutions to the problem. So how we did that, first of all, as I mentioned, we started off by getting the students interested in the issue. So engaging them in a discussion about what's happening in the oceans. And as you'll see, there's a reason why we picked oceans. It really fits in well with the grade 7 science curriculum. So we had stories, personal anecdotes of trips we had taken, infographics, videos, etc. And then we took 2 grade 7 science units, interactions within ecosystems and pure substances and mixtures, and took the bits we liked from those 2 units and put them together to show students that tackling these real world problems really doesn't happen in silos. You need an interdisciplinary, even within science, approach to tackle these problems. Then we use different types of inquiry to help them learn about the problems and the solutions. And at the end of the unit, we employed a design thinking protocol to get them to take everything that they have learned and come up with an DGs. I would highly recommend going to their website and learning more about them. They're a great way to frame your curriculum so that it is relevant and important. So we chose number 14, life below water, which has the goal of conserving and sustainably using the oceans. So then we had to, like I said, we used the oceans, life below water, as the lens through which to view the curriculum. And we looked for connections between issues that the oceans are facing right now and how we could teach students about these issues through the curriculum that's already there in science. So, for example, with plastics. Plastics was the first statistic that I showed you. It's a big issue. It's something I saw on my March break trip that I went and told the students about and showed them pictures from my trip. Plastics was a really great way to cover impacts of human activities on the environment from the interaction strand, and also a really great way to look at properties of matter. And I'll show you how we did that as we kind of go through the unit.
So we wanted to use several different types of inquiry models. So we had sort of certain activities that were much more structured, lab stations, and then some guided inquiry where they could create their own procedure for a lab, and then the design thinking portion was entirely free, and we really helped the kids sort of select their own ideas, but that was all their own interest. So just to give you an example, like we had our properties of matter stations, pretty typical as our structured inquiry, but then we moved into sort of like a design lab. Students were allowed to play around with like different ingredients of bioplastics, creating their own design, and then we moved to entirely free inquiry for design thinking. So we'll get back to this a little bit later on how we structured our design thinking process, but we really used sort of this protocol to help kids like come up with ideas, test them, make them stronger, and then put them into action. So we are an IB middle years program in NYP school. So this is how we develop our units, but it's what I really like about it is it has come up with a really succinct statement of inquiry for our unit. So human activities have consequences that affect the sustainability of our natural environments. So their statement of inquiry that really drove our whole unit. We were able to connect both like the interactions in ecosystems and our pure and mixed substances to that one thing through the context of oceans. So this is basically how we went through our unit. So I think we spent about 2 months on it, two and a bit.
About 22 classes.
22 classes. So we started off with a bit of a diagnostic. What do you know about our oceans? What do you want to know? What do you think are the big issues here? And we used like what came out of that discussion we constantly sort of went back to what their questions were that they created and what they wanted to know. So we focused on 4 main issues during our unit. We looked at plastics, biomagnification, we looked at pollution and oil spills and sort of cleaning up oceans, and we talked about overfishing too. So these connected to different strands in both units, and in both Ontario subject matters. And then we had a unit test, and then we dove right into our action plan with their design thinking. And then that last part, that action plan, it wasn't assessed or evaluated, and it really gave the chance to students to like have a very meaningful and personal chance to learn and make a difference.
So this is what we started with, our diagnostics. So we just asked students what do they think are some of the issues facing the world's oceans, and a little think, pair, share. And then we asked them to kind of, from what they came up with and also with what we came up with, could they kind of rank or prioritize what they think are the most pressing issues facing the ocean today? And then this was the question that kind of drove the rest of the unit. How can we better protect our oceans? Then we had them come up with their own questions about the oceans. What do they need to know in order to be able to come up with solutions to these problems? What do you need to learn about? What do you need to know about in order to come up with a solution to the plastic problem, or to come up with an idea about how to reverse ocean acidification, things like that? What do you feel like you need to learn about? What questions do you have that are going to drive this unit towards you finding a sustainable solution to these problems? Did you have a question?
Did they come up with the how might we question, or did you have it ready?
That was our how might we question, but later when they did the design thinking protocol, they came up with their own how might we question. So we took them through a question formulation technique, which comes from the Right Question Institute. Asked them to just sit for 5 minutes in silence and just write as many questions as they could possibly think of without stopping to discuss, judge, or answer any of their questions. So no such thing as a bad question, just write. So they fill up, for some students it was more challenging than others, but for some they filled up an entire paper full of questions about the ocean that they had. Then we asked them to take some time to improve their questions. So any questions they wrote that ended up being a yes or no question, how could they take that and make it more open-ended? Then we asked them to prioritize their questions and pick their top 3, discuss with their neighbors why those were their top 3 questions, and in the 4th step, we asked them to share their questions. So we just did a Padlet. You could use any type of high-tech or low-tech system to do this. And these were some of the questions that they came up with. So we tried to pull from these questions every time we did a lesson or an activity. plastics?
So the first issue that we tackled, and we spent the longest on this one, was plastic. So we started with some trivia about like how much plastic is in the ocean and how much plastic is used and what the impact of it is. We had some really troubling YouTube videos. And there's a great CDC marketplace that talks about how much plastic is in various bottled water companies that you can just buy at like local Ontario stores. The kids were totally rocked after that. And so we did our chemical and physical property stations, a white powder lab. We did some research, and I think the highlight of that was we did bioplastics. So students were able to make their own bioplastics. So this was our stations of matter, and these were our bioplastics. So we had students, they were able to choose their plasticizer, and they were able to like pick from a selection of ingredients, and we kind of gave them like based on how much starch or what the type of starch was, like what properties it might have afterwards when we made it. So kids could really design, like I want them like bendy or hard or whatever they wanted. And so the ones on the side there, that's right after we first poured them. So they're still looking all liquidy. And then some of them really crinkled and cracked. And we were able to sort of talk about like, why did certain like recipes and formulations create different plastics? And how much of it had to do with how you produced it or just the materials and stuff. So kids really enjoyed this activity.
Did you include in your resources?
Yeah.
Bioplastics? Because I've never seen anything like
Yeah.
that.
It was great.
We have the whole lab instructions and the slideshow that we use for all of them.
And what's a white powder lab?
Oh, it's a ye-old investigate an unknown white powder. So we gave them like baking soda, flour, whatever.
This one there in
You
the
can see they're
bottom.
testing it.
Okay.
So they have to test it whether or not it reacts with acid, dissolves, and then they get a chart of what the properties of various things are, and they can use that chart to identify it.
So this entire module was framed around if we have a better understanding of the properties of plastic, maybe we can come up with a better solution to traditional plastics. So we talked about polymers and what a polymer is. And we talked about after they made the plastics, they tested some of the different physical properties. We left them in the freezer, we heated them, we looked at flexibility, hardness, are they malleable? So we used properties of matter to help us understand what makes traditional plastics different from bioplastics, et cetera. Why can't they degrade? Why can't they biodegrade? Why are these better or not as good a solution? We also talked a lot about we evaluated this as a solution. So what are the pros and cons of using bioplastics in terms of using up land to grow corn that could be used to feed people as opposed to making more plastic bags. So we talked a lot about all that as well. I won't go through this too much, but then the next issue was bioaccumulation. So our next tie-in was mainly ecosystems focused. So that's kind of our start with chemistry. Then we kind of went into ecosystems, and we brought plastics into this because plastics can bioaccumulate and biomagnify. And we talked about, there's a great video on YouTube about, are you eating plastic for dinner? And we talked about how there's an article out by The Guardian, like, is there plastic in your salt? And we talked about how different toxins make their way up the food chain. We did a lot of games and simulations to help students learn about bioaccumulation. Then we kind of went back into chemistry a little bit more from there and took the typical thing you would do in grade 7, which is a separating mixtures lab, and we reframed it as a how can we clean up our ocean water lab. So we talked a little bit about what would be a good way to clean up an oil spill. What are the properties of oil that make it different from water? Or we actually gave them a sample of dirty ocean water with like little cut up straws in it, like how are you going to remove plastic? Let's talk about the different separation techniques as it relates to oceans. So we kind of gave them a few experiments to try, and then we really said, here's some dirty ocean water. You design the method, and you figure out how you're going to clean it up. And we did some demos, like we did a distillation of cherry Coke demo, and there are the kids like cleaning up their ocean water. The last issue was overfishing. So we really talked about how overfishing impacts food webs and food chains, and interactions in the ecosystem. So we talked about symbiotic relationships, we talked about predation and prey relationships, and again, we did lots of games and had some good videos to showcase these ideas, all within the context of what happens if you remove too much of one species from the ecosystem. And that's them playing some games. Again, all these things are in our folder, you can have all of them.
So let's take a close look at what we did for our action plan or our design thinking process. So the first thing that we did is we had students we had them empathize with the ocean. The ocean was our user, our recipient of this empathy. So we said, from your perspective, we had them reflect on what they think their most personal problems and challenges and with the ocean are. So to them, what is the most important thing about protecting the ocean? And then to the ocean, what would be its most important thing? So we've got to make sure those two things line up when we're talking about solving those problems. The next thing we had students do is really sort of consolidate and focus and prioritize. So thinking about what the ocean needs most. So coming up with the biggest challenge for the ocean. So narrowing down what we started with and then creating a Mad Lib to really succinctly say ocean needs blank in order to be sustainable and healthy. So each child was really focusing on like one issue. Maybe it was like a healthy ecosystem, or it needs clean water, or maybe it needs good amounts of dissolved oxygen, whatever it was that they wanted there. So then we, to your question, talked about some how might we questions. So how might we, and then in broad enough that lots of different solutions can be used to make them. And I think I've got an example here. So the student was talking a lot about invasive species. So her how might we questions focused on that. And the next thing that we looked at, and I found this particular page to be the most helpful for students, is to think about what they had control over and what they could really take on. So we had them write down things that they can have full control over and decision-making power in that smallest circle, and then anything they need to help with or support with. So from friends, from teachers, they might need to be in a little bit of a team to do it. Or maybe they need help from their parents or a school administrator or whatever else. And then what can they absolutely not control? So they couldn't make a carbon tax. That is not within their control. They cannot change how species interact. So we've got an example here. So this person, she knows she can't find a way for invasive species to be compatible with each other, but she could spread awareness or put up posters. So giving kids a sense of what they can actually do. So then based on that, we had kids come up with, Crazy Eights is a protocol where they're coming up with 8 rapid ideas, so they had 40 seconds per box to illustrate what they were doing, and then when that 40 seconds was up, they switched to the next box and they created a new solution. So just thinking about lots of different ideas, again, to the no judgment, just like put it down there. It doesn't have to be an idea that you think will totally work, you just gotta get it down there. So here's some examples. So newspapers, letters, that looks like a video. But they've got their ideas here. So just rapid prototyping of what they could possibly do. So next thing that we did is we had kids select their top 3 from this, so what they thought their top 3 was, and write them down on a Post-it note. So move them into words, a little description, put them on a Post-it note, and then we sort it. So we said anybody who's got a Post-it note or idea to solve overfishing, like put it on this table. Pollution, put it on this table. Plastics, put it on this table. Invasive species, and we grouped them into what their issues were. And kids got the ability to go around the room, take a look at what all the ideas in the classroom were. And they had a certain amount of stickers each. And they could use these stickers to let people know that their idea was really interesting to them. So I call it a democracy. So they're just sort of voting on what they think is really good and valuable idea. And then students can go back to what their Post-it notes were and see what the feedback is on that. It also helped us sort our students, like physically in the room. We had students sit, if they were all focused on the same issue, felt really strongly about plastics, they could sit together and eventually work on their action plan as a group so they can team up to do that. So then we gave this as sort of a brainstorming space for what they might do, so refine and design their awesome idea. So this build space had a whole bunch of things about how they could potentially lead their action plan based on the ideas they'd seen and the feedback they were seeing. So they had to think about the tools, the resources, and the people they would need to make it happen. And they were doing this mostly in those little groups of about 3 or 4 that they created earlier on. And then this was their more detailed action plan. So students were able to think about what are my goals, how am I going to do it, and what do I need to do to accomplish it, and kind of create like a sequence and sort of a timeline for what they wanted to do. I'd say students, we had about a week to sort of deliver on this. So the timeline was tight. So we had to help the kids make goals and to-do lists that they could accomplish within that time.
Yeah, because World Oceans Day happened to be June 6th. or
Yeah,
something.
we found out World Oceans Day was coming up, so that was our deadline.
Make that. So to celebrate World Ocean Day, we had a few students who actually ended up carrying out really successful action plans. So for example, in the cafeteria, these 3 boys wanted to design a game. So as you're leaving the cafeteria with your garbage, to make sure that students know which recycling bin where things go. That's a really big issue at our school. So they wanted to make it a game where you could actually shoot. They brought in their mini basketball hoops and they made posters and like shoot for the ocean and throw your thing in the right bin. And then another one was girls were collecting all the plastic utensils that people were using in the cafeterias to show people like how much waste we are creating just from our lunches. But probably, there was another slide that has another one. These girls created a website to let people know about the health of coral reefs around the world and which ones were good for diving and which ones need to be more protected. We had some students wrote and performed a really awesome rap. We have a news program at our school called York TV. So some students decided let's do a news bit for York TV, and they came together and wrote that and did it. Some students found out that gum is a big pollutant in the ocean, so they found this company that takes your gum and repurposes it into containers. So they wanted to see if they didn't actually follow through on their action plan, thankfully, because that's kind of gross.
Yeah.
But at least they were, excited about it. And then other students were making like an awareness campaign for, if you go back to one slide, Robin, we have some TVs around the school so that they would play on those TVs so students would see them. But our best action plan came from this group here. They titled their action plan "The Last Straw." And this was from 2 boys who I had in my class that gave me so much grief over the year. They were the hard students to deal with, and they came out with the best project in the end. So they created this not very exciting slideshow. They did their research and they put together all these statistics about plastic and the impact of plastic on the environment. They came up with some alternatives, and then they came up with a plan for what they wanted the York School to do. Can we switch to paper straws? Can we at least do that? So they took this to the principal. They met with the head of Aramark, who's our catering company. And if you flip on the next slide, you'll see we no longer have straws in the cafeteria. So that for me was like, the goosebumps moment. Finally these kids were engaged and they did something they're so proud of it, and they came back the next year and Miss Hexina, did you see it worked? We don't have straws in the cafeteria anymore, and they're so happy about it. So they're really proud that they made a difference. And we just put up some student feedback that we got. The kids really, really, really loved this unit. There were games, it was hands-on, and it really brought out why this was important. So the first piece of feedback is it made me realize what we're doing to the oceans and what we can help to save it. And the last piece is it was really great that we could actually do our action plan. So what I really, really liked about this unit is it was fun, but it had a broader purpose.
So if you look at what went well for us, we had a lot of student buy-in. They were really engaged in what they were learning, and they felt that it was important. There was a lot of student voice and choice in terms of what they were able to do and what they were able to research and learning about things that made them excited. Lots of activities, as Julia said. And we really felt that it did smoothly link between ecosystems and chemistry. That was one of my worries, is that it would feel like, today is an ecosystems day, today is a chemistry day, but it didn't, because it was all really grounded in oceans. And the design thinking, we did it, no marks, not evaluated, and I think it really motivated students to take action and not for a carrot that is a mark, or being worried that their work wasn't good enough when they were just trying to make a difference. But most importantly, it was super fun. So what we would do next time, I think we would make a white powder lab on theme. It didn't really have an oceans theme, but we could look into that. We didn't bring any Indigenous perspectives on sustainability in, and I think that would be a great next step. As also looking to Arctic ecosystems, we kind of focus more on warm water oceans, I would say. And I think there's a really good opportunity to look more into climate change. So maybe ocean acidification, and doing maybe a lab or investigation on how strong an acid is versus how much it decays a piece of chalk, and talking about how that would affect coral. We did bring in like some science in the news articles, but maybe doing a little bit more of that, little 5-minute presentations from the students who are finding these articles about our oceans. And I think we did a really good job at the very start of the unit diagnosing and figuring out like what their big questions were. And I think if I were to do it again, I would go back to those a little bit more and journal on them. Okay, what do you still feel the same way about your most important issues? Have you learned anything that could help answer those initial questions that you had? And we would want more time. We were feeling a little bit rushed at the end of it for those action plans, and we wish we had started a little bit earlier. But time is
Yeah, go ahead.
How many hours a week do you have for science?
we see our students every other day for 75 minutes.
I'm just jealous.
So yeah, that's our presentation. If you have any questions, please let us know, and feel free to browse through our folders. We put almost everything we did in there. Feel free to use anything that you like.
Did the planet or plastic issue of National Geographic come out during the unit? Have you seen that one?
No.
On the front of the cover is it looks like an iceberg, and then under the water it's a plastic bag.
No.
The whole issue is about plastics.
No, and then I think after that, like not too long after we finished the unit, Starbucks announced that they were phasing out plastic straws.
And IKEA is phasing
IKEA
out
too?
single-use plastic. Yeah.
I'm really sorry it's late, but anyways, we might have touched on this. Did you have any students who really didn't ever get like motivated or really couldn't like find a topic, and how did you deal with that?
I don't think so, because they could do anything they wanted. We made it so that even if all you wanted to do was just learn more about an issue, that was okay.
Okay.
You didn't have to go out and change the world. Even if you just really wanted to learn about this type of invasive species, that was okay. We just wanted them to take some ownership.
And look at this, I asked, I've done something similar to this, but the student being like, yeah, I'm done. Well, not. And just like motivate, like keep more, like your question is not broad enough, or you're getting a yes or no answer.
I did have some resistance like that, and I think what kept them going was the fact that I'm not marking this. This is actually important. And I just kept reiterating that, like, really? Like, are we really doing this? I'm like, yes, you're actually going to go talk to the principal. Like, this presentation is great. Make sure it's principal level quality. And they're like, oh, yeah, okay. I'll fix my typos. Right? I think that really helped. And it was a little bit of me, like, being an actress. Like, this is so important. Like, you're actually going to make it. And that's what we're like, okay, we'll do it.
Pretty dramatic.
Yeah, there was no, like, no marks, no nothing. Like, you're just doing this because it actually matters. And that really helped, especially for those two boys that usually don't care about anything.
Did you mark them on it? How did you assess them?
Didn't assess the action plan at all. Just did it because it mattered. And we only mark them on a test because in our school, they have to write a grade 7 science exam. We don't have any say in that. So we have to have a couple of tests during the year in order for them to learn test-taking skills. And in other units, we assessed differently. So we had to just mark the summative was a test.
Is that IB test
It was-
standard across all IB schools, or it's just
No.
specific to girls?
In grade 7, in the middle years program, you make your own tests.
I don't think I can get away with 3 months or 2.5 months of not assessing. So if
Right.
you had an area where you would recommend you could integrate assessment of some sort, what would you say would be the best?
I would assess maybe the lab,
Okay.
like scientific investigation skills, like I strength in Ontario. And for us, that works really well with MIT. That would be our criterion B. Yeah, I would definitely assess the lab. Like they're coming up with a procedure, material, and all that stuff.
Or there's based in the plastics part too,
Mhm.
writing things about.
Right. Application and communication, evaluating bioplastics as an alternative. That could be a good idea.
You mentioned something with a cherry Coke installation.
Oh, yeah.
I'm wondering what that was about.
So we were modeling and demoing different separation techniques to prepare them for the cleaning up ocean water lab. And one of the ones that we demoed, if you buy some cherry Coke, and heat it up in a Bunsen burner, first, like, the compounds that give it the smell will start to come out, and if you like actually hold up this piece of tubing to your nose, you can smell the cherry coke smell coming out. Then what will happen is the water will start to boil, come down the tube and condense, and you'll get a technical clear, beautiful water. And you'll be left with this like black high fructose corn syrup tar left in your Erlenmeyer flask. So that was just a demo for the student. But yeah, it's so easy. I just stuck like a temperature probe in there because they're at certain temperatures is when you can expect certain things to happen. So it was really fun. And that's just a feature of it.
Did you use that as oil spill simulant?
No, we actually had oil and water.
Oh, you
Oil
used that for
simulant.
women?
Simulant, yeah, just vegetable oil. And I had to figure out how they would separate that.
Did they use like the different techniques that you would clean up the ocean from an oil spill, like big cotton swabs trying to soak it up,
They
or
tried soaking it up,
vacuuming it
they
up?
tried scooping it out, they tried all sorts of different things.
And they just realized how hard it
Yeah,
is.
it's really hard, yeah.
It gets everywhere.
And it gets everywhere, yeah. So for their cleaning up the ocean actual experiment, we didn't put oil in, just for the fact that it makes a huge mess and it's really hard to clean. We gave them like sand, salt, some salt, some plastic. I don't think we put iron in that one, no.
Yeah.
Plastic.
And were you two co-teaching, or did you have?
We had our
No,
own
we had our own
separate
classes.
classes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did one section, she had two.
How many kids in each class?
Yeah, 20 or 21.
Any other questions? You guys want to look through the resources?
Yeah, you're free to have a look or.
Those who came in late,
Stay or
I'll show
go.
you our link to, we've shared like all of our resources for what we did in this unit. There you go. So we've got like the first link's our presentation and the second link is our resources. You guys will find it tonight. There's like a unit plan in there and then day by day of what we would have done on each day. Which I think is like.
You guys would have had like other lessons to hit on, like your substance misuse.
Yeah.
Like kind of like a separate kind of like aside from that.
Like you'll see it, is there like the notes? in
There's
there?
like a note, a little slideshow.
The classification matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's all like, we didn't do anything outside of this unit for